So that's what we did coming into 2022. And now in the first quarter, that looked great because we saw inflation, we saw the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, fixed income assets had kind of, I think one of their worst starts ever.
Now you guys are basically saying, well, duh, like the smart people saw this coming from a mile away and didn't buy any of that, fluff that they were throwing at us, and realized, holy crap, like you pump, half the GDP in 2 years into the economy, things are going to go bananas. And so you guys started strategizing against that, or how are you like handling that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we were kind of discussing this internally in the kind of second half of last year. And when we started to come, it kind of became, as time went on, it became clearer and clearer that it's very potential, it's very probable that inflation was not going to be transitory and it was going to become a little bit more entrenched. And in that case, the Federal Reserve, given they have a dual mandate, right, maximum employment, which has been very low for a decent amount of time now, and then price stability, which is inflation, well, the Federal Reserve would have no choice but to act to tame inflation. And the only thing the Federal Reserve can do that to do that is to raise interest rates, right? And so the most obvious thing to do if that were to happen, so we were going from, just to use the 10-year US government bond as a proxy, because that's the one that's mostly used. So that was trading last year at kind of between, 1.3 and 1.5%. And if they were to raise interest rates, significantly, that was going to go significantly higher. That would mean the market value of fixed income assets were going to have to come down, right? And so since most portfolios are structured, and we're not an exception, we have stocks, bonds, and other things, but since most portfolios have stocks and bonds in them, you were going to see the most obvious kind of thing to do was to cut your fixed income exposure. And that's what we did coming into 2022 as a way of kind of getting out of the way of that interest rate hike that we expected from the Federal Reserve. And we also rotated into things that we felt like would benefit from an inflationary environment that was more sticky than transitory, like commodities, right? Commodities is kind of an obvious place that benefits from inflation. And so that's what we did coming into 2022. And now in the first quarter, that looked great because we saw inflation, we saw the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, fixed income assets had kind of, I think one of their worst starts ever. But equities had some volatility as well, but we had, the commodities to offset some of that volatility in the equity side of client portfolios. Second quarter, and as I mentioned this, I was just writing our letter for the second quarter. The second quarter, everything was down as we introduced a new element into the kind of narrative and the conversation, which is recession, right? And so towards the end of the second quarter, the economic data started to come in relatively weak and show clear signs of slowing in the economy, and hence all of the very cyclical things like commodities rolled over also. So then you had stocks go down, bonds went down, commodities went down in the second quarter. So it's been kind of a brutal start to the year. The worst start for stocks in 50 years, worst start for I think most asset classes in a very long period of time.
So let me ask you this. I mean, they pumped, the problem seems to be that they pumped all of this money into the economy, right? And now that flow of money is slowing, right? Because that money, that velocity of turnover and money is slowing down. And so but where did it all go? Right?
So
did it just go to Jeff? And that's that? Like at Amazon or what?
No. I mean, it did go. It flows ultimately into asset prices, right? And that's why, as I was saying before, you saw, the price of real estate, the price of stocks, the price of crypto, the price of real assets, like obviously housing and commodities, everything went up. And what happens is, it goes into kind of the stuff that is most obvious first, and then it starts to seep into the stuff that's more speculative. So that's why you saw, crypto and biotechnology and high growth technology. Those are the things that had the craziest price
Yeah.
performance, right? But what happens, to your point, when that reverses, which is what started, at the beginning of this year, that stuff comes down the hardest as well.
Right.
And we actually started to see signs of that in early 2021. If you look at very speculative high growth technology stocks and biotechnology stocks, they actually peaked in February 2021. So they've been in a downtrend for, going on 18 months at this point.
So
Crypto obviously
Yeah, of course.
evaporated $2 trillion of value since.
Of course. So